You work hard, you show up every day, you do what you're supposed to do, and yet no matter how many hours you put in, no matter how many paychecks land in your account, something always feels off. The money disappears, not all at once, not in some dramatic collapse. It just quietly, steadily, and visibly drains away. And the uncomfortable truth is that this isn't an accident. It isn't bad luck. It isn't because you spend too much on coffee. The system, the actual financial and economic system built around you, is engineered to keep your account lighter than it should be. And most people never figure that out. They just keep blaming themselves. So let's talk about what's actually happening. Let's start with the most obvious one that somehow almost nobody talks about clearly: inflation. You've heard the word your whole life. Prices go up, things get more expensive, sure. But here's what they don't teach you in school: inflation isn't just an inconvenience, it's a hidden tax, a silent one that no politician has to vote for, no law has to authorize, and no citizen has to approve. When the government or central bank prints more money, each dollar you already have becomes worth slightly less. The purchasing power of your savings quietly erodes. That 20,000 sitting in your savings account earning 0.3% interest while inflation runs at 6 or 7%, that's not savings. That's a slow bleed. You're losing real wealth every single year while the number on the screen stays the same or even inches upward. People see the number and feel safe. That's the trick. The number stays, the value leaves. And here's where it gets darker. The people designing monetary policy understand this perfectly. They aren't confused about what happens when you expand the money supply. They know. Central banks around the world have been running models on this for decades. The result is always the same. Those who hold assets, real estate, stocks, businesses come out ahead because asset prices rise with inflation. Those who hold cash, who keep their savings in a regular bank account, get quietly wiped out over time. It's not a conspiracy, it's just mechanics. And the mechanics have always favored the people who already have more to begin with. But inflation is just the beginning. There are layers to this thing. Think
Chiefly
about the
because of the
banking
tremendous
system
acceptance of
itself for a
gas for home
second.
heating,
When you
winter
deposit
demands
money in a
often shoot up
bank,
as high as
you
15
probably feel
times
like you're
summer
storing it,
requirements.
like it's sitting there
To
in a
gear
vault with
our
your name
pipeline
on it.
highway
That's
system
not
to
what's
summer
happening.
demand
The
would make
bank
it
takes your
impossible
money,
to serve all our
lends it
customers
out
on
at
the coldest
interest,
winter days.
and gives you back almost
So
nothing in
obviously,
return.
that is not
In
a practical solution.
2023 and
We
2024,
have to keep the gas
major banks
flowing
in the
through our
United States
pipeline
were paying
highway at
savings
full
account
volume
customers
all during the
somewhere
summer,
between
distribute enough for summer
0.01
needs,
and
and store the
1% in
surplus
interest.
as
At
close
the
to the
same
population
time, those
centers as
same banks
possible
were
to
lending
meet the
money
heavy
out
winter
at
demand.
credit card rates of 20, 25, even
As you
29%.
know,
They
that
borrow
is
from
the
you at near
subject of this
zero.
meeting.
They lend to others at 30
Where
times that
and
rate.
how
And you
to
call it
store the
having a
tremendous
bank
amounts
account,
of natural
like it's a
gas needed
normal,
to see our
neutral thing. It
territory
is
through a heavy
normal.
winter.
That's the problem. Normal doesn't mean fair. And
Only
speaking of
last
credit
week I was
cards,
trying to
this
make
is
clear
one of
the
the most
enormity of this
ruthlessly
storage
efficient
problem to
wealth
my young
extraction
grandson.
machines ever invented.
And since figures
Not because
alone,
credit itself
especially
is
in the
evil.
billions,
Credit
don't
can
seem
be
to
a
impress
tool.
him,
But the
I
way
resorted to a
consumer
couple of
credit is
simple
structured,
illustrations.
marketed, and deployed against ordinary people is genuinely predatory.
I
Credit
pointed out
card
to him
companies
that
spend
16
billions of
houses
dollars
on
every
one
year
square block
studying
of a
human
residential
psychology.
community
They know
require 2
exactly
million
when
cubic
you're
feet
most
of
likely
natural
to
gas
spend
to see
beyond
them
your
through a
means.
typical winter.
They know that the distance
To store
between
that
your
amount of
hand and the
gas
tap of a
takes a
card
tank 200 feet
reduces
in
the
diameter and
psychological
over
pain of
6
spending
stories high.
by a measurable amount. They know that rewards programs make you feel like you're
A
winning
city
while
of,
they
say,
collect interest that
100,000
dwarfs whatever
requires
cash back you
approximately
receive.
4 billion
They
cubic
know
feet of
that
gas
minimum
during a
payment
single
structures
winter.
are designed to keep you in debt for years on a balance
Yet
that
to
should have
store
been paid
even
off
1
in
billion
months.
cubic feet of
None
gas
of this is
would
accidental.
require 20
These are
tanks,
features, not
each as
flaws.
high as the
The
Empire State
average
Building.
American household carrying credit card debt pays over $1,000 a year just in interest.
Therefore,
Not paying
storage
down the
tanks are
principal,
not the solution.
not buying
Which
anything
leads us
new,
right back to the
just
original
interest.
problem.
Money
Where
that
can a sufficient
vanishes
supply
into the
of gas
financial
to
system
meet
and
our
never
huge
comes
winter
back.
demand be
Multiply
stored?
that by tens of millions of households, and you start to understand the scale of what's being extracted. Now let's
The
talk
only
about
possible
fees,
answer seems
because
to lie
fees are
in nature
everywhere
itself.
and almost
Placing the
nobody
gas
adds them
back
up.
into its
Your
natural
bank
storehouse
charges a monthly
by
maintenance
pumping it
fee
into the
if
same
your
underground
balance drops
formation from which
below a
the
certain
original gas
threshold.
was
They
withdrawn.
charge you to use an
After all,
ATM
it
that
was held
isn't
safe
theirs.
here for millions
They
of
charge
years.
you an overdraft fee that can be
Throughout the
$35 on a
summer,
$12
we would
purchase.
fill these
They
natural
charge you for
reservoirs from
paper
our
statements,
pipeline system.
for wire
Then,
transfers,
during the
for
cold
international
months, withdraw
transactions,
the stored
for
gas to supply the
inactivity.
heavier needs of
Some
the
accounts
consumer.
charge you just for
As
existing
you all know,
if you don't meet the
underground
minimum
storage in
balance
depleted
requirement.
reservoirs
And
has
here's
been
the
tried
thing about
and found
overdraft
practical
fees
on a
specifically.
small scale.
Research has consistently shown that the
And
people
there's
hit
our
hardest
challenge,
by
gentlemen,
overdraft fees
to make
are
underground
people who
storage
can least
practical on a
afford
large
them.
scale,
People living
large
paycheck
enough
to
to meet the
paycheck,
needs of
people
our
who are
customers
already
during
financially
even the
stressed,
severest
end
winter.
up paying the most in
And
fees.
there it was.
The system
That
designed to
simple.
protect them
And that
charges
complicated.
them the most for being
Simple
vulnerable. That's
because
not
the
irony,
basic idea
that's
was so
design.
logical.
There are roughly $34 billion in
Because there were
overdraft
1,000
and
unknown
insufficient
factors to
fund
be
fees
worked out.
collected by U.S. banks every single
Now my
year.
people rolled up their
34
sleeves
billion.
and went to
From
work.
people who, by
They
definition,
examined well
didn't have
records
enough
of
money in their
field after
accounts.
field,
Let that land for a
estimated their
moment.
volume,
But let's
and
go
determined
deeper
whether
than
the
fees,
field was
because
actually
fees
a
are at
closed
least
reservoir.
visible if you look for them.
They
The
studied
really
every detail of the
insidious stuff
gas-producing
operates at
strata
a
in the
level
most
most
promising
people never
fields,
look at. Let's talk
calculating
about
how fast the
subscriptions,
gas could be
not as
injected
a moral
and how quickly
judgment,
it might be
but as a
withdrawn.
systemic phenomenon.
Then, after
The
seemingly
subscription
endless
economy is
and
one of the most
painstaking
brilliant
preparation,
and
my people
quietly
moved into the
devastating
field.
things to happen to
They
personal finance in
reconditioned
the last
hundreds of
20
old
years.
wells,
Every company on
installing
earth
new
has figured
casings
out
and connections
that
to
charging you
withstand the great
$12
pressures
a
needed
month
to pump the
feels
storage
like
gas.
nothing. It barely registers.
And
You
when they
don't
were
even think
finished,
about it.
my
But
people had
$12
met
a
still
month is
another seemingly impossible
$144 a
challenge.
year. And if you have 10
For
subscriptions,
throughout
that's
America's original natural
$1,440
gas
a year.
land,
Many
the
people
large
have closer to
depleted
20 or
fields found
25
new
active
usefulness
subscriptions at any
as
given time.
vast storage
Some of them on
reservoirs
free
to provide
trials
a
that
steady
converted to paid
year-round
months
gas
ago.
supply for
Some
the
of them
hundreds
for
of communities
services
in the
they
area.
haven't actually used in a year.
And so
The money
today,
leaves
with ample
automatically.
supply
There's no
and
friction.
adequate storage,
You don't have to
the
decide to
day-to-day
spend
challenge
it.
for my
You
people
already
lies in the
decided once a
smooth
long
and
time ago,
uninterrupted
and
operation
now it
of the
just goes.
immensely intricate
Studies have
system
found
which
that people
transports me from
consistently
well
and
or
dramatically
storage pool
underestimate
to the
how much
millions of
they
people
spend
who
on
use me.
subscriptions. When asked to guess,
As I
the
leave the
average
producing
person
fields,
estimates
I am
their
carried
monthly
through
subscription
pipelines
spending at
to a
about
compressor
$80.
station.
The actual
For it
average
takes
is
power
closer to
in the form of
240,
pressure
three
to
times
move me
higher.
over long
That
distances.
gap between perceived and actual
Power
spending
supplied
is not
at
an
needed
accident.
intervals
It's
by
what
these
subscription
giant
billing was
compressors.
designed to create. Then there's
Then,
insurance. Now,
back through the
insurance serves a
transmission
real
lines to a
purpose.
measuring and
Nobody
regulating
serious
station.
argues against the idea of
Here,
protecting
every
against
last cubic foot
catastrophic
of me
loss.
is measured
But
before I
the
am allowed
insurance
to pass
industry,
on
as it
through the
currently
transmission
operates
lines.
in most Western countries,
Then,
is
on to the
another
point
layer
where
of
I am
systematic
transferred from the big
extraction.
transmission
You pay
lines
premiums
and
every
fed
month.
into a city
The insurance
distribution
company
system,
invests those
known to my
premiums.
people as
They
a city
fight
gate.
claims, delay payouts,
Here, the
and
great
interpret
pressures
policy
under which I
language in
traveled
the
in the
way
big
least
pipes
favorable to
are
you when the
reduced
time
and
comes.
regulated.
Health insurance in the United
Then I'm
States is
sent
its
on
own
to
entire
district
category of
regulators.
financial brutality.
And then,
The average
through the
American
hundreds of
family
miles
pays
of
over
pipe which lie under the
$22,000
streets of
per
the city.
year in health insurance premiums.
But simply
That's
moving me
before
from field to
co-pays,
city is
before
only one part of the
deductibles,
job.
before the things
For at
insurance
key
doesn't
points
cover.
throughout the system,
And medical debt
my
is
rate
now
of
the
flow
leading
is
cause
constantly
of personal
controlled as the
bankruptcy in the
demand for
country.
my services
You
varies
paid
from
into
hour
a
to hour.
system your entire working life,
The focal
and it can
point
still
and
destroy
nerve
you
center for all
financially
this
if you
intricate
get
but
seriously
vital
sick.
control is
The
here
system
in the
will tell
headquarters
you this
dispatching
is
room.
just how it works.
And through
That
the
these are
actions
the
of the
costs of
dispatcher,
living in a modern society.
every well,
But
compressor
look who
station,
profits.
and
The
storage
five
field in the
largest
system
health insurance
is
companies
smoothly
in the U.S.
coordinated to the
made a
constantly
combined
changing
profit
consumer
of
requirements.
over $60 billion in a
It takes
single
years
recent
of
year.
apprenticeship
60
and more
billion
years of
in
practice
profit,
to
while
properly
millions of
interpret,
Americans ration
analyze,
insulin
and act
and
upon
skip
this
doctor
complex
visits
pipeline
because they
system.
couldn't afford the bills. Let's shift for a
But science
second to something a
continues to
little more
provide
subtle.
better ways.
The psychology of
And more
prices.
and more,
Everything
automation
in
is
your
being
daily
put to work
commercial
for me.
life has been
By
designed to
means of
make
this
you spend
telemetering
more
system,
than you intend
the
to.
dispatcher
The
controls
music in
dozens
grocery
of
stores is
regulators and
slower than
valves
normal
without moving from
because
his chair.
slower music leads to slower
By the mere
walking,
push of a button,
and more
he
time time in
operates
the
a valve
store
on a
and
line
more
more than
items
90
in the
miles
cart.
away.
The most profitable
And as if
items
that
are
weren't
at eye
enough,
level.
This
Loss
scientific
leaders,
marvel
those things
sends in a
priced below
continuous
cost to
record
get
of
you in the
operations
door
from every
are
control
placed at the
point.
back of the store, so you have to walk past everything else to
Everywhere I
reach
look
them.
these days,
Supermarkets
things
and
are
retailers
automatically
spend
done.
enormous amounts of
In
money
the engineering
on
department,
consumer
it's
psychology
the
research.
McElroy
The
pipeline
layout of the
analyzer that
store,
helps my
the
people to
lighting,
solve
the
those knotty
temperature, the
distribution
placement
problems.
of products, the fonts on
In
sales
accounting,
signs,
the
all of
electronic
it is
machines seem
optimized
to eat
to
up
extract
facts and figures
maximum
at
spending
jet-age speed.
from every person who
This one
walks through the
automatically
door.
computes and
Online,
makes
it's
out
even more
150
aggressive.
bills a minute for
Dynamic
all kinds
pricing
of
means the
users.
same product can cost different amounts
And
depending
thus,
on your browsing
all the
history,
facilities of the
your
industry
location,
and
the
the
device
energies
you're
of all
using,
who serve
and
me
even the
are
time of
devoted
day.
to supplying
Airlines,
you with a
hotels, and
continuous
e-commerce
flow of natural
platforms
gas
routinely charge
under
different
all
customers different
conditions,
prices for identical
hot
products.
or cold.
Scarcity signals, the only 3 left message, the 10 people are looking at this right now warning, are frequently fabricated or manipulated to create urgency that isn't real. The countdown timer on that deal may reset the moment it hits zero. The limited availability might not be limited at all. You are being manipulated by
Sunday is
mathematics and
supposed to be a
behavioral
nice
science
quiet
every
day in a
time you open
dispatching
a
office.
shopping app.
But
And
not
then
when
there's
there's a
lifestyle
serious cold
inflation.
front moving in.
This one is internal, but it's fed by external forces. As people
chief's on
earn
his way
more,
over.
they tend to spend more.
George?
Not proportionally,
Looks like
but
we're in for
often
a cold spell.
exponentially. The
Right.
first
We're
raise
packing the
buys a
line.
nicer
Give us
apartment.
750
The promotion
pounds on
buys
the
a newer
26-inch
car.
line.
The
Packing the
second
line
raise
in
brings the
ordinary
nicer
language
restaurant,
simply
the better
means filling up the
vacations,
big
the
pipelines to
upgraded
pressure
wardrobe,
capacity.
and none of
In
these
order to
things
have a
are
maximum
inherently
supply
wrong.
available
But
for
the
the increased
advertising
demand
industry,
of
the
a sudden
media,
cold
social
snap.
media, the culture of visible consumption, all of it is constantly
Turn 'em over,
pushing
Joe.
you toward spending as the default expression of
Throughout the
success. The
system,
more you earn,
additional
the
giant
more
compressors
elaborate the
now
spending
roar
is
into
expected
action
to become.
to
And
increase
so
pressure
the
in the
gap
lines
between
and to
income
pump
and
extra
actual
gas out of
savings
the storage
doesn't
pools.
necessarily shrink as people
At the
earn more.
dispatching room,
Sometimes
the
it
arrival
grows
of the chief
because the
dispatcher
system is
crystallizes
very
the
good
strategy with which
at
they plan to
finding
meet
ways
the
to
increased
absorb whatever
demand
you
brought
make.
on by the cold
This is
wave.
why the majority
Better
of
notify
Americans,
production
even
and
those
transmission
earning
superintendent.
six-figure salaries,
They'll want to have
live
radio-equipped
paycheck to
trucks and
paycheck.
cars
It's not
available at key
stupidity.
points.
It's not laziness.
And
It's
Fred,
a
can we get
system
more
that
gas
has
from the
evolved
Southwest?
over
Some was
decades
available
to
yesterday.
capture
We're getting an
income
additional
at every
75
available
million.
point
Good. How
before it
about
can
our
become
storage pools?
savings
We're
or
already
wealth.
withdrawing from all
Now
of them.
wages, let's
Number
talk
6
about
compressor
wages, because
station,
the
which
other
we had
side of the
idled, is
bank
now
account
pumping.
drain
All right.
isn't just
That's
where the
about all we
money
can do
goes,
for
it's
now.
how little
Let's
comes
sit tight for the
in
time being.
relative to
Keep
what
our
it
eyes on the
should.
teletype.
Worker
But
productivity
what
in the
they
United
see coming
States
over
has
the
increased by
teletype
roughly
tells them there's no
70% since
Throughout the day
1979.
and into the
Wages
night,
for
temperatures
non-supervisory
keep on
workers have
falling
grown by
steadily.
about 11%
By
in
Monday,
the same
with
period when
industrial
adjusted
plants
for
and stores
inflation.
increasing their usage after
70%
the
more
weekend
output
cutback,
per worker.
the demand for gas is
11%
about
more
to
real
hit the
pay.
winter's peak.
The gap between
All
those
over
two
the
numbers
system,
represents
in
an enormous
Charleston,
transfer of
Columbus,
wealth
and
from
Pittsburgh,
workers to
the
capital owners.
dispatchers worked around the
Profit
clock
margins
to maintain
expanded.
adequate pressure.
Executive compensation
Pressure on
exploded.
line B4
Stock
is holding
buybacks
well.
reached
We're watching in
record
case it
levels
drops.
year after
Our
year.
62.
And the workers who actually
Line
produced the
24 down to
value
29
got
pounds.
11% more in
Increase
real
your take
terms
from storage
over
pools
nearly half a
X6,
century. This isn't an
X58,
ideological point. These are
X59.
Bureau of Labor
The
Statistics
temperatures
numbers.
don't keep on
The
dropping,
math
that should
is the
see us
math.
through.
If your wages had kept pace with productivity growth since 1979, the median American worker would be making approximately $70,000 a year instead of around
And
$38,000.
so, through
That
advanced
gap, that
planning
invisible
and the
paycheck
newest
you never
technical
received,
facilities,
has been flowing
the
somewhere.
winter's
It
worst
flowed to
is met.
shareholders, to executives, to the
But
financial
complacence
system.
is not
It
among
didn't
the traits of
disappear.
those who
It
serve me.
moved. And then there
For
are
there are
taxes.
still countless
Now,
new
before you
challenges
think
ahead,
this is going to be a
and still
standard
more
left
uses
or
for my
right
talents to
argument
add to the
about tax
20,000
rates,
already in
hold on,
existence.
because the real story is
entire
more
house comes
interesting
with
and more
built-in
troubling
appliances.
than either side
And aside
usually
from the water
admits.
heater and
The U.S.
incinerator
tax
in this
code is about 4
all-gas
million
home,
words long. 4 million? The entire Bible is about
You'll have a built-in
750,000 words. The entire collected works of Shakespeare are about 1 million words.
fold-away
The
tabletop
U.S.
burners.
tax code is 4 times that. And that complexity isn't there to make the system fairer. It's there because
automatic
over
ice
decades,
maker
lobbyists
refrigerator.
representing corporations and wealthy individuals have inserted
And best of
exemptions,
all,
deductions, credits,
year-round
special
gas air
rules, and
conditioning.
carve-outs
Summer
that
cooling
systematically
and winter
reduce
heating.
the tax
For
burden
even though you
on those who
associate
can
me most
afford tax
logically with your
lawyers,
homes,
while ordinary
I have
workers who
also won
receive
quite a name
W-2
for
income and
myself in
can't
the
hide their
exciting
earnings
new
in
world
offshore
of
vehicles or pass-through
petrochemistry,
entities pay
where I am
relatively
used
more.
not
A
as a
teacher
fuel,
making
but as a
$50,000
raw
a year
material for
pays their
thousands
full
of useful
marginal rate
products,
on every dollar
such as
above certain
detergents,
thresholds.
nylon,
A private
and
equity
synthetic
fund
rubber.
manager making $50
I am
million
equally popular
often
in
pays
thousands
the
of
capital gains
manufacturing
rate on
processes
carried
which
interest,
require a
which was
fuel with
capped at
reliability,
20% for years,
absolute
sometimes
cleanliness,
lower than what the teacher
and
pays.
the ability
This
to
isn't a
deliver controlled,
misunderstanding.
continuous heat.
Generations of
The
lobbyists
very
fought
same
for that
qualities which
distinction.
make possible my appearance in
Generations
your
of
homes
politicians allowed it
as
to
the
stand.
burner with a
And
brain.
ordinary taxpayers make up the
And
difference.
because you consider
Let's
me such
zoom
an
out for a
ideal
second.
fuel,
Step
the gas
back
companies of the
and look at
country
all of
each
this
year
together.
build
You have
facilities to
inflation
serve more and
eroding the
more
real
families.
value of your savings.
And that,
You
of
have
course,
banks
brings
paying
us
you
right
almost
around
nothing
full
on
circle
deposits
to the
while lending at
continuing need
enormous
for new
rates.
sources of
You
supply.
have credit card companies using
But
behavioral
where is
science
there
to
left to search?
maximize your debt burden. You have fees
The people who
designed to
serve me
extract
have several
maximum
answers.
revenue from people
For one,
with minimum balances.
right here in
You have
America's
subscription
original
billing
natural
engineered to
gas
fly
plant,
under your psychological
but at
radar.
levels
You have
far
insurance
below
systems that
any
take your
ever
money and
attempted
fight you
before.
when you need it back. You have
Drilling
retail
here is
environments
more than a mile
scientifically
and a half
designed
below
to
the
make you
surface,
spend more than you intended.
called the
You have
deep
wages
horizon
that have been
by the
suppressed
geologists.
relative to productivity for
They
decades.
believe that
You
down
have a
there
tax
in the deep
code built to
sands,
protect the
reserves
wealthy
of natural
and burden
gas
the
may be
average
greater
earner.
than any
None of
yet
these things
discovered.
are happening in isolation. They
And
form
far
a
out in the Gulf of
system,
Mexico,
a
still
coherent,
more men of
interlocking,
vision,
mutually
courage, and
reinforcing system.
determination
And that
sought and
system has
found
one consistent
tremendous
effect.
untapped
It
reservoirs
moves
of
money
natural
from
gas.
ordinary people toward those who
While deep
already
in the
have more.
swamplands of
Not
Louisiana,
through violence,
the
not
latest
through overt
scientific
theft,
findings
but
indicate
through
that
the
there are
accumulated weight of
fantastic new
thousands
fields
of
of the modern
small,
fuel,
legal, normalized
natural
extractions.
gas.
And here's what makes it so effective.
Yes,
Each individual
my
piece
people
seems
look to the
reasonable.
future
Of
with
course, banks charge
justifiable
fees for
confidence.
services. Of course, insurance
Each of
costs
them
money.
has his own
Of course,
part in
prices
making a
fluctuate.
complex system
Of
work
course, some
smoothly
things are
and
just more
efficiently.
expensive than they used to be.
Each has an
Each part
interesting
in
and vital
isolation
job that
sounds
makes
like
him
just how
more
the
than
world
just the
works.
employee of
But
a
when you
public
add
utility.
up all of it, when you
Each
calculate
knows that
what
his
the
job is
average
important,
person actually loses
not
to
only
the
to
system
himself,
over a lifetime,
but to the
the number
community
is
in which he
staggering.
lives.
Economists who have tried to quantify the
truly
total
proud to say
extraction,
that
including wage
these are
suppression,
my people.
inflation, financial
men and
fees,
women who
predatory
serve-
credit, and
And no
tax
single
policy
product
disparities,
has
have
better
arrived at
capitalized on
figures
the
suggesting
eye-arresting
that the
power
median
of
American
colorful
family
plastics
loses
than has
hundreds
the
of
Wurlitzer
thousands of dollars
coin-operated
over their
phonograph.
working life compared to what a truly neutral economic system would deliver. Hundreds of thousands of dollars not to fraud, not to
Here are the
crime,
cabinets
to
again,
the system
ready for a
functioning
rub-down.
exactly as designed. So what do you do with this? Is
First,
the
by
answer
machine,
despair? Is the answer
and
rage?
then by
Neither
hand.
of those is useful, but neither is the alternative a lot of people land on,
has
which is to
produced a
pretend
good
the system is
substitute in this
neutral
work
and that every
for
financial
man's
outcome
strong
is
back
purely the result
and
of
man's
individual
strong
choices
arm.
and individual discipline. That
This may
framing
be
is
the
itself
hard
a
way,
product of the system.
but it
It
is
keeps
the best
people
way.
focused on whether they should
And
cut their
that's the
streaming
way
service
Wurlitzer
instead of
wants it.
asking why wages haven't kept pace with productivity in 50 years. The first real step
This
is
is what's called the
visibility.
door trim
You
line.
cannot fight what you cannot see.
Paralleling it
Most
is the
people go
cabinet
through their
trim line.
entire financial lives
This is
without ever
modern mass
sitting down
production at
and
its
mapping
best.
every single extraction
Along
point,
the
every
door trim
fee,
line
every interest charge,
are
every
installed the selector
inflation-adjusted
trim
loss,
casting,
every subscription
the
they
side
forgot,
pilasters,
every tax
the metal
advantage they
grill,
don't have access to.
grill
When
plastics,
you do that accounting,
record
something
changer
changes.
compartment window,
You stop feeling
and
vaguely
a number
anxious
of other
about
units
money,
composing
and you
the
start
door
seeing the
assembly.
specific mechanisms,
Come to think
and
of it,
specific
it's difficult to
mechanisms can
recall
be
any
addressed.
object,
Some of them
unless it be a
you
bank
can
vault,
address
where
individually,
the door is more
switching to a
important
bank
to the
or
general
credit
scheme of
union that
things
doesn't charge
than it
predatory
is on a
fees,
Wurlitzer
paying
jukebox.
down high interest debt
The
aggressively
cabinet trim
before it
line is
compounds
another
into
center
something
for the assembly
unmanageable,
of a host of
moving
parts
savings into
that
accounts
flow
or
here from all
instruments that at
sections
least
of the
partially keep pace with inflation,
Along
auditing
this
every
line,
subscription you pay
each
for,
unit
and
acquires the
canceling the
decorative
ones you're
record
not
changer
actively
compartment
using,
panel,
understanding
back door,
exactly what insurance
the
you
light
have, what it
shields,
actually covers,
the trim
and whether you're
castings,
overpaying for
the
coverage you
speaker
don't
door,
need, or
the locks,
undercovered where it
the
matters.
lamps,
But let's
the
be
sockets,
honest,
and
individual
many
action
other
alone
functional
has real
and
limits.
decorative features.
One person switching banks doesn't change the overdraft
Each
fee
one of
structure.
these parts in
One
a
family
modern
budgeting
Wurlitzer
harder doesn't
contributes in
fix
its
the
own
wage
way
gap.
to either the
There are
eye
things that
appeal
require
or the
collective
ear appeal of
response,
these instruments.
demanding transparency in pricing,
It's interesting to
supporting
note that the
financial
entire
regulations
cabinet
that
and
protect
door
ordinary
are metal
depositors,
framed
understanding
for extra
tax
ruggedness.
policy well enough to vote on it
It's
intelligently.
this skyscraper
These aren't
type of
partisan
construction
positions, they're
that has
basic
won
self-interest.
Wurlitzer commercial
The
phonographs
system will not reform
their
itself
reputation for
because enough
rendering long
individuals
service.
download a budgeting app.
And if you will
There's
pardon
also
us
a
for
knowledge
blowing our
gap
horn
that the
just
system
one
benefits from
tiny toot.
maintaining. Financial
It's one of the
literacy is
reasons
not
why
taught
Wurlitzer
seriously in most schools.
sells more
This is not
commercial
an
phonographs
oversight. A
than all other
population that doesn't
manufacturers
understand
combined.
compound interest, doesn't understand
Again,
how inflation
that
works,
ever-recurring
doesn't
job,
understand the difference
inspection.
between an asset and a
Does it
liability,
pass the
is a
technician's
population
test? It
that
must.
is significantly
And when
easier
it
to
does,
extract from.
it's ready
The
for
banking
final
industry,
assembly.
the credit card industry, and
But
the financial
hold on.
services sector
The
have,
date?
at
It's only
various
a
points
shell.
in recent history,
Couldn't play a note.
actively lobbied against stronger
Into it
financial
must
literacy
go
requirements
myriad
in
parts
schools.
and sub-assemblies
Think about what that
from the
tells you
metalworking
about where
division.
their interests lie.
And that's
Understanding
where
money,
we're headed
understanding
now.
how it moves, understanding the structures that shape it. That's not
Every
something
day,
that gets
large
handed to you.
quantities
You
of
have to go
brass,
looking for it.
steel,
And
and
the
aluminum
fact that you're watching
arrive
something
at
like this
Wurlitzer's
suggests
North
you
Tunnel
already
on the plant.
suspect that the comfortable explanations
Immediately,
aren't the
they are
whole
tested
story.
for
That
thickness,
suspicion is worth
hardness,
following.
and chemical
Because
structure.
here's what the system
And
counts
then,
on more than
placed in
anything else.
stock to
Passive
meet the
acceptance.
requirements of the
The belief
metalworking
that
division.
this is just how it is.
Here's a
That
look-see
nothing
into that
could be
division.
fundamentally different. That the only rational response is to work harder,
What
spend a little
beehive
less,
of activity
try to
with
save a little
beehive
more,
drone
and hope things
magnified
work
a
out.
couple of million
That
times.
belief, more than any
Hard
single
to realize
financial mechanism,
that the end
is
result
the
of all
most
this
powerful
noise
tool in the
is
whole
music.
machine.
Sweet
Because a
music,
person who believes the
jazz
system
music,
is neutral and natural
jive
will
music,
never question it.
swing
Will
music,
never examine it.
good music.
We'll just keep
Providing
absorbing the
fun
losses
for folks
quietly
of all ages.
and wondering why the numbers never quite add up. The numbers
But
don't add
getting
up
back to the
because they
raw
were never
materials,
meant to.
they
Not
must
for
first
most
be
people.
cut and
You are
formed
not bad with
to
money.
required
You were
shapes
not
and
born
sizes,
without financial discipline.
and often to
You are not
tolerances as
uniquely
close as
unlucky.
5,
You are
10
operating
thousandths of
inside
an
a
inch.
system that has been meticulously constructed over generations to ensure that the money you earn, save, and spend
In metalworking,
gets redistributed
as in woodworking,
upward at every
Wurlitzer
available
has set its
opportunity.
standards of quality,
Recognizing
and
that
believe me,
isn't
they're
paranoia.
sky high.
It's the beginning of
The
something
men
much
not
more
only
useful.
check parts
It's
for
the
the phonograph,
beginning of actually understanding the
check the
game you're
gauges,
playing. Because
which
once
are
you
used to
understand
check
the
the
game,
parts.
you stop blaming yourself for every loss and start looking at the board. You start asking different questions. Not what did I do wrong,
But
but
in
who
metalworking,
designed this and why.
as in
Not
woodworking,
why can't I get
you'll
ahead,
find some
but where
operations
exactly
best
is the
done by
money
hand.
going and by what mechanism. Those questions
Tool
lead
making and
somewhere.
die sinking,
The old
for
questions
example,
just lead to more
are
guilt,
still largely
more
a
anxiety,
craftsmanship business
and more of the same.
with
The
human
drain is
brain
real, the system
and the
is
human
real.
hand
The-
coordinate.
and the first act of genuine financial
Occasionally,
self-defense
the tool
is
maker's
simply
craftsmanship
refusing to
must
pretend
extend into
otherwise.
realms of